And today's question comes from Myra. Myra writes, Lori, I'm at my wit's end, desperate for answers. Help, anything. My 5-year-old boy is displaying signs that upset me now, but scare me for when he's a teenager. He doesn't lack love or support in my eyes, as I am constantly showering him with positive talk, self-esteem, and much, much affection. So what am I doing wrong for him to behave this way? T is my middle child. I have a 2-year-old baby girl and a 7-year-old son. T has always been my mama's boy, lover, easy child, slept through the night at 2 weeks old, and was always the perfect child. Ever since he started school, he has had a hard time adjusting, but as time goes by, it's gotten better. T has screaming and crying temper tantrums at least once a day if he doesn't get what he wants. It doesn't matter what it is, even if it will hurt him. He's very sneaky. If I tell him no for whatever reason, I try to explain why not, he finds a way to do it behind my back. While that's only disrespectful now, it's a characteristic of a delinquent in the future. For example, he was very sick last week, and he asked for a cheese stick, and I told him that I would rather give him another snack as dairy causes more mucus, and I didn't want him getting more sick. As soon as I turn the corner, he goes into the fridge and gets his cheese stick and hides it behind the kitchen island to eat it. It's almost like he doesn't hear anything else if he doesn't get what he wants. How do I meet his needs? I feel like if he respects us out of trust and love, he will think twice as a teenager being faced with the temptation rather than saying, my parents will never find out. Am I crazy? I've hugged him on many occasions and he calms down and then goes on to whine again if he doesn't get what he wants a second time. At 5, his communication and expressive language is not the greatest, and I try to see what he's feeling, but nothing seems to matter. Please help me. I don't know where to turn. Okay, Myra, I totally feel you. I feel your frustration and your anxiety around this, just jumping right off the page. And you've touched on a lot of really common challenges and some common fears that I want to help you reframe a bit so that you can start to see your son with a new pair of eyes. So first I want to say, please, please, please look at food intolerances, the cheese, the ear infections, the behavioral challenges, all that for me points to food issues. So if you don't see behavioral change, please research the brain-gut connection and see if it's affecting your child. It's really, really important. So now, first thing I want you to do is have some compassion for yourself. It's really hard to connect and be emotionally supportive with your kids if your mind is clouded with thoughts of him as a delinquent teenager. And I know that that may be a very real fear that's triggered in you, but the first thing I want you to do is just stop, take a breath, and then ask yourself, where is that fear coming from? Close your eyes. Try to connect with what's being triggered in you in those moments, because when you're triggered, you can't connect emotionally with your son. Do you really believe the fears that you talk about? You know, taking cheese from the refrigerator and melting down, are those real signs that we're headed for Julie Hall? I know that projecting our fears of the teenage years is really common and it's very understandable, but you want to breathe through those fears and then come back to the present moment so that you can start to approach the situation in the here and now with practical tools and confidence, and not from this place of fear or worry about 10 years down the road, because those fears, they're going to drive your reactions and your behaviors unconsciously if you don't start to look at them. Now, the behaviors that you described do sound like developmentally typical behaviors, challenging but not out of the ordinary for the ages and stages that you mentioned and for all that you have going on. You have 3 young kids, a long day, an early start, 2 50-minute car rides. Now, that kind of commute is probably stressful for you as an adult. So I imagine that for T, spending 6 hours in school and 2 in the car, that's most of his waking hours wrapped up right there. And I bet in those 8 hours, there's very little choice involved in happening for him. That he, even at 5, kids want some sense of choice over their life. So what I want you to do is, after you investigate your fears and practice some self-compassion, is let go of the judgment. I want you to remove the lens of sneaky and disrespectful, because while they may appear like factual descriptions, they're really just interpretations. Okay, they aren't observable facts. In order to connect and actually look underneath the behavior to what's driving it, it's important that we remove those labels, the judgments, the evaluations, the moral interpretations, and just look at what we can see happening in the moment, not what we think of it. And the reason is really just simply because judgments keep us disconnected. Judgments don't move you in the direction that you want to go. It's difficult to feel empathy and compassion for someone that you view as disrespectful or sneaky. You know, behaviors are really easy focal points, which can sort of distract us from what's really going on. Behaviors are easy to judge. They're easy sometimes to control, evaluate, criticize. Feelings, on the other hand, and needs, they're a bit more nebulous. They're harder to pinpoint without reflection, and they're impossible to control. So I want you to resist the urge to focus on what you don't want and instead start to focus on what you're all feeling. Now, a bit about judgment. Judgment really gets in the way of our perceptions of our children. The idea that T has always been, and it can be positive or negative, so the idea that T has always been a mama's boy, an easy, perfect child might be actually experiencing anxiety so severe that he's shutting down. There are kids who are called easy and they're actually living in chronic states of stress. So you might want to reflect on some of the messages that T hears about himself at home or at school. How does he see himself in comparison to his siblings? What kind of expectations or judgments does he feel responsible for living up to at 5 years old? It might be a lot of pressure, and pressure causes stress. So when you talk about T, I want you to reframe your language. Instead of a child who has a tantrum once or twice a day, what you really have is a child who becomes dysregulated to the point of losing control once or twice a day. It isn't a child who's making cognitive choices to anger you or upset you or get his way. So you want to reframe a child who's sneaky and disrespectful to a child who's having trouble controlling his impulses, making appropriate choices, and calming his strong emotions. So how do we calm the strong emotions in a child? A couple of things we can do to build a buffer to that stress and help calm a child down. The first thing is consistently set clear limits and boundaries. When he asked for a cheese stick and you told him that you would rather give him another snack as dairy causes more mucus and you didn't want him getting more sick, to me that's not so clear. I heard your preference and I heard a really good reason, but not a strong boundary. So my suggestion is to make this limit more definitive. If the limit is no, you may not have a cheese stick, but you may choose something else, we want to be clear about that. Sounds like maybe you shared your preference and made a request of him in hopes that he would respect you enough to consider your request. But I know that if my 6-year-old asks for another cookie and I told her that that I would prefer that she choose something else, I have to be prepared for her to choose the thing that she wants because my limit wasn't clear enough. He's really too young to expect that kind of planning and forethought to take place or to know that it's bad for him and make a decision not to eat it. I mean, I have trouble doing that myself sometimes. So now maybe you did say no at first. And what you want to do is make sure you're proactive in helping kids keep those limits and supporting him by making the right choices, by setting up conditions for him to succeed. I've said to my daughter in the past, you know what, I know that you're going to be tempted to take a cookie from the kitchen, so I'm going to help you and put them away where you won't see them. And this has actually led to my daughter saying at another time in the future, Mama, can you put this candy somewhere where I can't reach it because I know I'm going to eat it? So when you say, am I crazy for thinking that if he loves and respects us that he'll think twice when he's a teenager with that temptation, it's not that you're crazy, it's just a bit off. The fact is that he may still very well make that poor decision as a teenager, just as my kid might take that cookie when I'm not looking. But what will be the difference is that he will likely come to you after he makes those poor decisions and ask you for your help because you've built that bond of trust on relationship and on understanding that there is more to his behavior that meets the eye. Connect emotionally. No, you can't have it. I know you really want one. They're your favorite. I can help you choose something else. And then wait for him to be responsive and move the cheese sticks out of reach. Kids who can't control their impulses, they don't get better by being tempted. They get better when they have clear supportive limits. So another tip for calming the stress is to look deeper at his real needs. Now, I know you said you were doing this, but I want you to understand that cheese sticks are a strategy, maybe to feeling good, to feeling autonomous. They're a manifestation of a deeper issue. I want you to investigate a little bit deeper because I'm seeing a kid with a really intense schedule, and perhaps he feels like he needs a bit more choice and autonomy around the decisions in his life. You might have to set food limits, but where can he have a bit more leeway to make his own decisions? Kids who don't feel like they have a lot of control over what happens to them, they tend to show us in their behaviors. And his insistence on the cheese stick may be showing a feeling of sadness about having very little choice or control over his life. So you can say, I'm wondering if you're feeling sad and like you don't get to make a lot of choices for yourself. Does it feel like I tell you what to do all the time? That just feels like it's too much. That's how we validate the need. If we stay left-brained and logical, he's going to get through the moment with you as fast as he can, but he's then going to attempt to meet his needs when you aren't looking. So when you're addressing needs, be mindful of your buts. I know you do, but, or I know you're feeling, but. If you've already said no, be confident that his reactions are not because he isn't listening or doesn't respect you, and they don't call for you to repeat or reinforce the limit. But what's happening is there's expressions of frustration happening, and you can really only support him through this. So how do we help them resolve the inner turmoil? The first thing I would suggest is after a long day, 10 or 20 minutes outside in the park before you start that trek home will go a long way towards helping your kids release some of that tension that builds up from the day. And it's going to give you an opportunity to connect and make your requests and then share your needs with each other after being apart for so long. It's a really good time to have quality time. When your son is overwhelmed at not getting what he wants, remember it's a reaction of an immature system. It's an emotional response. He's expressing his frustration. So you have to be okay with it, and you have to get really clear on what soothes him. What sensory experiences help him regulate? Is it music, movement, touch? You said he calms when you hug him, but then he whines again. Be okay with the whine. I want you to get comfortable with his pain, and don't be offended by it. It's not about you. Empathy is soothing, noticing his feelings and behaviors and reflecting that in your understanding. I see how upset you are. You're hitting the floor because you think it's unfair that I won't let you have a cheese stick. Sometimes you can ask, I know you're upset. I see those feelings in your face. Your face is getting red. I bet you want to scream. How can I help? Sometimes you can ask, but you can't discipline the stress response. You can only soothe it. Empathy is your first way in. It's the way to preempt the meltdown. If you're already in the moment, you can only help him through it. Right? But you want to keep the focus on changing his brain state, not his behavior. His behavior will follow his brain state. So be okay with where he is now. Crying is a release. It isn't a statement of manipulation. Is it safe for him to express right now? Is he hurting anyone? But kids need to offload their emotions. When my 6-year-old hears no more TV, she tends to become really, really, really upset. She cries, and in the past she has become aggressive. But she moves to acceptance and is able to self-regulate in her own time as long as I stand by as a supportive base without becoming reactive to her expression. I don't need to change the situation, but I can show her that I hear and understand her and then wait for her to be receptive to my invitation to connect and heal. She's really sensitive and she's a very strong-willed child. She does not take no easily or quickly, but these qualities are going to serve her in the future. And I notice that as she gets older, as long as I'm consistent in my limits, it takes less and less time for her to calm down. And then afterwards, we're able to talk about better strategies when we aren't in the heat of the moment. Please remember that you can't connect with your kid and help him when he's in that brain state. It's unreasonable for kids, for us to expect kids to just be okay with our limits. So it's very likely that he isn't hearing you in those moments because he's reacting to what he feels. He needs you to connect emotionally and provide him with the tools to manage his stress. So what tools do you have set up around your house ready for him to access when he feels bad? What helps him calm down? My kid likes to use a beanbag to flop on and pound when she's mad. She also likes to be tickled and kissed all over. So when she acts aggressive or is feeling overly emotional, I offer alternatives to connect with her in the ways that I know she's going to respond to. It isn't perfect and it takes time to find your groove, but ask yourself, what does my child respond to? Is it music? Is it nature? Is it running in the backyard? Deep breathing, water play, digging in the sandbox? Don't be afraid to use play or be silly to connect. It releases the tension and it opens kids up. So chase him with hugs or have a tug of war with a blanket. Tell him, I see your mad building up. I bet you want to get it out. Here, grab this blanket. I'll take that mad for you. This is a sensory experience that's connecting, and it's physically helping him motor out that stress response. Sometimes you can't talk. You just have to wing it and through trial and error see what he's responsive to. But here's the thing, being a conscious, empathetic parent doesn't mean that love and cuddles and positive talk to build self-esteem are going to solve all of our problems or make our children's reactions to disappointment and change any less apparent. It just means that we're providing the means for them to safely offload their stress and their frustration, which helps their brains grow and helps their brains make stronger connections to things like empathy, compassion for others, and impulse control. But it isn't immediate, and kids mess up a lot, and they need tons of repetition to get it right. So don't try and force new strategies on a child in the heat of the moment. You can talk about better strategies for expressing feelings at another time. In that moment, you want to ask, how can I help my kid? Kids need connected caregivers who are willing to show empathy and model positive coping skills without that expectation of obedience or that immediate behavioral change. So Myra, I hope that helped you see a bit of your child in a bit of a different light so you can come to some new creative solutions. And for everyone else, I'd like to know, what tools do you use to help soothe your child? Post them in the comments below and share your ideas with Myra and with our other community. As always, you can find more tips and tools on the website. And if you found this teachable moment helpful, please like it and share it with a friend. Until next time, everybody, remember, it is about consciousness, not perfection.